Hi, everyone. This is Deborah Deras, and we are here on Deb TV. Dynamic, empowered, and bold. And tonight we have Transformational Tuesday because I am committed to bringing you experts in their fields to be able to help you transform your life spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And tonight we have a very special guest because he is not only our expert, he is my own coach, he is my own friend, and he is one of my inspirations. And so I'm so happy and pleased to be able to share him with you and to bring his message out into the world. Please help me welcome Corey Tyler.
I love that introduction, Deborah. Can I record that and just keep it whenever I do a function or something and just play that? That was wonderful.
Yes, for sure. And I'll send you a little clip of it. I'll edit it out and so you can put it on. But that's just my personal introduction. I definitely am going to give you your proper introduction. But I just want to say, when I started posting on Instagram and Facebook that you were going to be our guest, in our community, you are super famous, right? So we were like, you have Corey Tyler on your show? I'm like, yes. So I know that you have a lot of fans out there, and they're really, really excited to hear you specifically talk about our topic today, which is communication to be able to get your needs and wants met. So if you have not already, turn off your TV, turn off your cell phone. I'm going to turn off mine. Make sure you call in any friends and family, post it on Facebook, let them know that they need to be in here, they need to be watching this show, no housewives, no bachelor, because this is not only going to help you in your personal life, this is going to help you in your professional life and in your most important relationship, which is with yourself. So we are going to have a ball in the next 45 minutes. So I am going to introduce Corey Tyler. He is a relationship coach specializing in nonviolent communication, a process that was established by the late Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Corey has been a licensed spiritual practitioner for 15 years. Married for 7, and father of 2 young, adorable boys, using his personal experiences and the principles of NVC to meet and assist his clients to find peace and navigate through challenging and difficult experiences that life can bring. So as you can hear from that, he doesn't just talk about it, he walks the talk and brings in his own life experiences. So I want to hear, Corey, before we get into the nitty-gritty of NVC and the processes, how did you become so passionate about communication, and how did that become your focus of your vocation?
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for everyone who is watching. I am delighted to be here, and I'm very excited anytime I get to talk about communication. Because I love to talk, and B, for many years I was living a life of, like many of us live, understanding that there's this pattern, and you go through school, and then you get married, and then you get a nice job, and the white picket fence, and and this whole idea of sort of like, wow, I was a really great people pleaser, and a lot of my happiness stemmed from my recognition that I was making others happy. Wasn't working so well throughout much of my life, but I thought that was the only way to go. So for me, when I talk about this personal practice that I have, sure, this is something that I share with clients and I'm very passionate about, but I'm going to go home and practice this stuff after this show is done when I walk into the apartment with my wife and kids. So for me, there are many ways that we sort of communicate, and certainly with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we're communicating all the time. Now, as to if we're connecting to ourselves and other people, that's the question. And so for tonight, if there's anything that I were to extend to your audience, it would be this. I want you to just keep in your mind an idea of when you have a difficult interaction or talk with somebody. They've done something that's not to your liking, or maybe you've done something that you recognize is not to their liking. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of where to go beyond the idea of good person, bad person. Oh, I messed up, or I did something great. oh, I made a mistake and now I'm going to be punished. All these kind of ways that we're sort of conditioned to respond to things.
I love that you talked about connection. One of my favorite actresses is Salma Hayek, right? Mm-hmm. And she is playing the voice of the girl in Paulo Coelho's what's that?
Oh, it's actually Kahlil Gibran.
Kahlil Gibran.
Yeah, the Prophet.
The Prophet, yeah, right?
Yeah, I saw it just the other day.
So she was talking about how she really was so excited to do this movie because she felt that we're in a spiritual crisis as human beings, especially with our children, because they are disconnected. That when you say connection, they think where to plug in their phone or where to plug in their iPad. So when you talk about communication as connection, that just lit me up, and I'm sure so many people, because we can be having 20,000 different ways. I almost get nervous when I hear about a new social media platform because I do social media consulting and I'm teaching workshops. I'm like, it's going to be endless. Every day there's going to be a new social media platform, and it doesn't mean that we're communicating anymore. Can you talk a little bit about what is connection and how we can connect? It's almost like the prerequisite before we can even talk about communication. What is connection and how do we get there?
Yeah. So what is connection and how do we get there? And for many of us, like myself, you know, being on this planet and a spiritual person or whatever your particular focus is, we want to have a good life. We want to have friends and family that we get along with. And we find oftentimes that we're in conflicts. And so I would say when we talk about connection and we talk about problems that we have, hey, you know, here's an in-law that I may not have been speaking to for the last 2 or 3 years. I can't get along with my mother. My boss doesn't understand me. My spouse doesn't understand me. All of those things. And so the first thing that I would say is the key is a little spin on the topic that you had, which was, you know, how to get what you want through communication, or at least that's how I read it. And I would actually slow that up a little bit and I would unpack want and go a little bit deeper into what I would call needs. Now, when I say what I call the N word, needs, you can have many different kinds of responses to that, because my sense is needs sort of implies that we're needy, that we're sort of begging, you know, that we're sort of pleading. Oh, I'm a needy person. I need this, that, or the other. And actually, it's quite the opposite. You and I, since we began this video call, a need has been met for oxygen and for everyone that's watching this show. So we're constantly, our needs are being met. And we talk about a platform like nonviolent communication. It's really based in this idea of when we get connected to what's alive in us, to what's alive in Corey, to what I'm feeling and needing. And there's another word, feel. Something happens where the possibility that when I'm in tune with what's going on inside of me, then all of a sudden it changes from being an argument that I'm having with my wife or a coworker. And all of a sudden it changes to where, well, let me understand what's going on inside of me. I'm feeling really hurt. I'm feeling really sad. So the feelings then can then serve as a catalyst, taking us to the next step, which is the needs. I'm feeling sad and hurt because I have a need for consideration, for acknowledgement, for respect. So it's when we have those moments where I call the slowdown, it's what I call the slowdown, that we can kind of get privy to what we're needing. And when we're connected to our feelings and needs, then you're talking about a connection, not a USB drive, but we're talking about an authentic connection that we have with ourselves. And then we can extend that to the others. So when I have a sense of what's going on inside of me, then the likelihood that I'd be open to understanding what's going on inside of you, that begins to emerge. And that's when you talk about having an authentic connection where people are able to really hear each other. I don't know if you heard this or not. It's a very interesting statistic. But when people are in an argument, 50% of our ability to hear drops.
Oh, my goodness.
The audible capacity to hear drops 50%. So we're really not hearing anything. All we're doing is getting ready to give back as good as we got.
Wow. Okay, so let's just to rewind back. So when you said it's not really about our wants, It's really about our needs, and that there's nothing wrong, no shame in our game, sin vergüenza, shameless, to have needs. It's not being needy, it's being human. As human beings, we need to breathe, we need to eat, we need to sleep, and if we don't get these needs met, we can get irritable and cranky, and it's really important for us, what I heard you say, is to slow down so that we can identify what we need. But one of the things that you said before was you being a people pleaser, and I know I was, and many, I call it Luisa the people pleaser. That's my inner people pleaser.
I like that.
You like that? And so better than Mañana Juana. So she would always like say yes and overcommit and overextend, because there was a sense, and I write about this in the Confessions of an Adrenaline Addict book, because wanting to be good enough, wanting for people to respect me or to admire me. So I used to overcommit. This was back in my early 20s to prove that I was worthy. But when you say that we need to slow down in order to find our needs, so many people don't even know what their needs are, or what, we're so disconnected as a society. Can you kind of explain what is nonviolent communication and how do needs fit into that puzzle?
Sure, absolutely. So a number of years ago, I was having some trouble in my relationship. And so I went to someone who is now my mentor, who knew about this, what I call a technology called nonviolent communication. It's been called compassionate communication, collaborative communication. And I said to him, hey, I'm going through a really tough time with my wife here, and it's really serious, and we're just really not able to hear one another, and we're getting into arguments more often than not. And I'll never forget, without missing a beat, he looked at me and he said, "Wonderful." And I said, "No, hold up a second, Bill. I don't think you heard me. I just said that we're having some really serious trouble." And this was when my wife was pregnant with our second child. And so the stakes were really high. And without skipping a beat again, he said, "Wonderful." And I was scratching my head. I said, first of all, I got to meet with this guy so I can uncover what this whole wonderful thing is about. Because right now it's not feeling wonderful to me at all. And so one of the things that I discovered when I sat down with this guy, and what the whole wonderful thing was alluding to, was in that moment, my body was telling me something. My body was telling me that I was frustrated, because I had a real need to connect. And in that moment, that situation served as a gift. And why was it a gift? Because my body was telling me, through my sadness and through my frustration, and quite honestly through my anger, that I had a series of needs that weren't being met. And to be quite honest, the same thing for my wife on her end. And so we got together with my friend. He was able to make it very clear that as human beings, these things that we call feelings are actually assets. Now, typically, we might look at feelings as sort of our adversaries, especially in the workplace. Hey, you don't want to show your cards, or you don't want to show how you really feel, because if someone really knows how you feel, then you'll be vulnerable. And we'll talk about the V word in a moment. But actually, it's quite the opposite. And what we talk about in nonviolent communication is this idea that our needs and our feelings, there's a wonderful dance going on. And so when our feelings tell us something, it's sort of edging us to look at what our needs, either being met or unmet, could be. So for example, with regards to my wife, when she was sitting down in front of my mentor, she was feeling really anxious because she had a need to be heard. And she wasn't feeling like I was providing enough space for her to be heard. And so that was one of the aha moments. But we never would have gotten there, Deborah, if we had just been contentious and sitting in our corner of, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and her saying the same thing. So nonviolent communication is a beautiful way of unpacking all of these very tense moments, all of these resentful feelings that we may harbor, and it's allowing us to distill them to recognize the gift underneath every single emotion that we have.
Okay, so I'm going to be devil's advocate, because I hear people in the background like, what the heck? How could my anger be a blessing? How could my frustration be a gift? How can my anxiety be a gift? Can you explain that?
Sure. So typically, when we look at our feelings and we are maybe compartmentalized, and I know I did this for so many years when I was so busy being a people pleaser and what I would call an accommodationist. But actually, in retrospect, that I don't even see that as a wrong thing, because in that moment I was trying to get love. I was trying to express love, and I really wanted acknowledgement. So that strategy that I had in terms of being a people pleaser, when it didn't turn out so well, and I may have done something that I thought someone was going to respond to affirmatively and graciously and with gratitude, and they would just be like, whatever, I would be hurt. I'd be sad. And maybe let's take on the A word, the anger word. When somebody does something, cuts in front of you on the freeway, for example, and all of a sudden, all this stuff is coming up and we're angry and we're frustrated. Typically, we say, that's not something to be proud of. But actually, what that anger is representing in a moment is a deeper need. So let's say anger, or frustration, or anxiety, or nervousness. They can all point to these beautiful things called needs, where in that moment, we had a need for safety that wasn't being met. We had a need for consideration when the person was swerving in front of us. And so it's basically getting us back to what I call the slowdown, because when we're living our life, hustle and bustle, we don't have the luxury of slowing down and saying, okay, what am I observing here? What am I feeling? And what am I needing? And all of those things. And there are actually 4 steps to nonviolent communication. Observing, our willingness to actually look at something versus judging it. Our ability to feel what we're feeling. Thirdly, to talk about what needs were either being met or not being met. And then the 4th one, which is our willingness to make a request. But in that moment, when someone cuts us off on the freeway, we don't necessarily have the wherewithal to slow down. But when we're willing to take a moment and take a breath, life changes, because for so many years, we've been conditioned for fight, flight, or freeze.
Oh, we have to talk about that. Don't let us forget.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about fight, flight, or freeze, right? Mm-hmm. And so this 4th piece of nonviolent communication really just spins things on its head for us, because it allows us to step away from what's going on so that we can look at it differently. And when we look at it differently, we can relate to ourselves differently, because what this all comes down to, Deborah, in a nutshell, is in any given moment, what am I telling myself? What are you telling yourself? And for the people watching this today, what are we telling ourselves when something happens that's not to our liking? How do we respond? How do we react? But the fact that we're able to ask that question in any moment and slow down, the likelihood that something will be different, because we're willing to maybe look and excavate and ask ourselves what's alive in us. What am I needing? What am I feeling? The chances that something happens differently for ourselves and for others is highly likely.
So those of you that have had maybe upsets at work, or you've had upsets in a relationship, the question that you're going to put on your Post-it note is, what am I needing? What am I feeling? What was the 3rd one?
Yeah. So what am I seeing? What am I observing is the first one.
What am I seeing?
Yeah. The 2nd one is, what am I feeling?
Okay.
We want to make a distinction between what we're feeling and what we're thinking. Well, I feel abandoned. Well, that's a thought. Let's talk about the feeling underneath what we would call abandoned. Well, I feel sad, or I feel hurt. Mm-hmm. I feel disappointed. The 3rd piece is, what am I be needing in this moment? And if you go onto the NVC websites, and there are many facilitators of it out there, they actually have a needs list.
Can we go to your website for that?
Well, they can actually go to my website for something I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. Okay. But if they want more information on the needs list, they can go to cnvc.org. CNVC, the Center for Nonviolent Communication, .org, and find a number of helpful information about needs. And then the 4th one, which is really bold, is request. So when I'm able to observe something, I'll give you a great example. So, and I keep going back to my wife. So we're there in my apartment one night, and we're talking, and all of a sudden we start leaning towards getting into an argument, right? And so I noticed this train of thought. I could feel it in my body. My body is feeling, okay, I'm feeling heated here. I'm feeling really pushed away here. And all of a sudden I decide to stop, because this line of conversation wasn't going in a place that I thought was going to be very helpful, nor did she. So in that moment, I was able to, one, observe my body and how I was reacting to the line of conversation. Secondly, I recognized my feelings. Wow, I'm feeling very angry here. I'm feeling angry because I have a need for consideration and acknowledgement. And then in that moment, I made a request. Would you be willing for us to stop talking for a moment so I can take a walk? And I literally, Deborah, I took a walk. I took a walk around the block. And I'm not saying we do this every time something that we don't like happens, but I'm merely saying our ability to access what's alive in us changes life on a dime. And all of a sudden, we're able to, or the possibility that we're able to connect with people and have a different outcome than before enters the equation.
Because the worst time to have a conversation, which I did, unfortunately, the other day, I can't be unattended without you. If I miss a week of a session with Corey, I run amok. So that's why I'm so glad we're going to resume our sessions very soon. But so what you were saying is earlier that 50% of our ability to hear when we're in that fight or flight mode, and I know this from the adrenaline addiction, you're not able to even think or process information because your body thinks that you're in a crisis, so all the blood's going to the extremities. So you're taking a walk is giving not only your body a chance to release, but it's giving your mind a chance to slow down enough to say, what am I seeing? What am I feeling? So what am I seeing? What am I feeling? And then what am I needing? And then that's the opportunity, once you're in a calmer place, to make that request.
Sure.
Can you give an example, like in the workplace, like how this could play out with a coworker kind of thing?
Sure. So you get an email from a coworker in which they basically are letting you know that they're not happy with your performance. You really messed this project up. Your report was late. You were late to the meeting. The project was delayed because of you. Whatever that is, a lot of times our communications, and especially in the workplace when there are timetables and there's an urgency, if we're not careful, it can really be a culture of judgment, fear, and a sense of scarcity, not enough to go around. And so what you may see in that email, or maybe in that interaction, if someone tells you to your face, look, you're not showing up the way that you need to here. This thing happened because of you, and da 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 da. So in that moment, we would have a reflex of, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. How could I have let this happen? You know what? Either they're right and I messed this thing up and I'm a terrible person, or they're wrong and I'm gonna give them an earful to let them know who they think they are, emailing me or stepping up to me and letting me know that this is, my problem or my liability or my mistake. And so even in the workplace or relationship or our dynamic with our families, our in-laws, our children, one thing is constant with all of that. And the constant thing, Deborah, is that everyone is in an attempt or making an attempt to meet their needs. Everyone. So that person that emails you or suggests that you're not on your A game, they're trying to get their needs met. So in that moment, when we're able to slow down and say, okay, I can see that I'm going to get defensive here. I'm going to see that I'm probably going to try to give as good as I got. Just that willingness to slow down and have a conversation with ourselves in any given scenario enters the possibility that in that moment, we can recognize what's going on inside us. And in doing that, we can get in tune with our needs. That, oh man, I'm hurt and I'm pushed back here because I have a real need for respect in this moment. And what happened there was something very, very magical. Because when we have that conversation with ourselves, Deborah, notice I didn't say it was coworker A's responsibility to give me respect. I said in that moment, I'm really needing respect. So the power of having that conversation with myself is that I'm ready and willing to recognize that I'm not making it that person's obligation to meet my need. I'm able to isolate that and independently grasp here's this really tender, beautiful thing called respect or consideration or acknowledgement or whatever it may be. And I'm able to recognize that that's something I might be willing to meet on my own without the other person. So it's a very powerful thing, and we can get further into that as we go along.
So let me just clarify, just so that everyone gets it. So one of the things that you said that I think is really important is that we're observing ourselves without judgment. I think that's really important to underline and highlight. So when I'm listening to myself and I'm noticing that I'm irritated or anxious, whatever, it's not about, there you go again, you're anxious, you're irritated. It's just, oh, that's interesting. That triggered you. Oh, that's interesting. That was a button for you.
Yeah.
And then the other important thing to underline and highlight that you said that I want to reiterate for people is that just because we're expressing a need doesn't mean it's the other person's responsibility to meet it.
Exactly.
So are we relieved just by saying it, or how does that work? Because we're speaking something because we want to have that need met. But if they're not responsible, then we're responsible for meeting our own need? Can you explain that?
I'm going to take you on the road with me, Deborah, because we're segueing here and we're right together here, synchronized swimming. So, exactly. So, there's one elixir that generates this whole thing, that without it, you just basically have 4 steps that are called observation, feelings, needs, and requests. And the elixir is empathy. I call it understanding. It's called compassion. And so empathy is very powerful in giving power to our ability to slow down and understand ourselves without any judgment. It's not always easy, but the power in this process is that when we're able to articulate, oh, you know, when this person just said this about me or they criticized me, I can see how I was going to be very defensive and argumentative with what they just did. Wow, I can recognize how I'm being judged here or how I'm feeling judged. So the empathy is an elixir that allows me to come back to life and to extricate any sense of criticism, blame, shame, evaluation, coulda, shoulda, woulda, or any of those things. Now, that doesn't mean that we are immune to judgment or criticism, but it does mean that we are able to access slowing down long enough to recognize when judgment is at play. So empathy serves as a huge dynamic where we're able, when we slow down, to say, you know what? Wow, I can see how I'm being judged here, or I can see how what I'm hearing is criticism, and I'm really sad about that. Or I can see how I'm judging other people or criticizing other people. Wow, I can see how that can serve as a way of disconnecting us versus connecting us. So when we have judgments and criticism and blame and shame and evaluations at play, we rarely get connection, Deborah. So that's the elixir, and that's the trick of all of this, is that when we're talking about connection and not just being connected to our devices, but willing to be present with someone, including ourselves when we've had a bad day, the fact that we're able to slow down and say, wow, you know what? I just had a long day. I'm doing the best that I can. And things didn't really go so well today at work. Things aren't going so well in terms of me talking to my neighbor. Things aren't going so well in terms of me talking to my spouse or my partner. I'm really sad about that. What's so beautiful about those examples that I just gave you is that nowhere in there is there a judgment implying that we're bad people. We're just doing the best that we can. So that's the beauty of what Marshall Rosenberg spoke of. And he made his transition into 2015, earlier in February, is this idea of when we're able to slow down, something in us comes alive when we're willing to empathize with ourselves. And here's getting back to the coworker situation. When I'm able to understand or be compassionate or empathetic with myself, then all of a sudden, when I walk through the living room and I step on a toy, and I have severe pain in my toe because my kids left out the toys, the fact that I would probably shout at them, the fact of that probably happening is less when I'm able to empathize with myself. Oh, I was able to empathize with myself, so maybe I'm able to empathize with my children even a bit more, and I don't have to use the strategy of violence or shouting at them. Wow. So this idea that when we give it to ourselves, there's a possibility that we're able to extend it to others. Now, not in any way advocating to being a doormat in any way. NVC is not about being nice, but it is about being connected to ourselves and then the possibility that we can connect with others.
And the power in that and the empathy in that, because when you're empathetic, you are loving yourself. You're caring about yourself enough to slow down and be patient to hear what you want and need. And if I'm understanding this right, the whole nonviolence part is when we can love ourselves, then we can experience peace. And when we're at peace, we embody that and bring that into our relationships, into our communication with others, because that's what we're being. Is that right?
Sure. So based on what you just said, there's this idea of, well, Corey, that sounds all great and fine and dandy and people holding hands and singing Kumbaya if I get this. But what about my supervisor or this coworker or my neighbor or my in-law or relative or brother or sister who I absolutely cannot stand? We haven't gotten along for years, and I'm very doubtful we're ever going to get along. The beauty to this literacy of needs and a heart-based language, and I'm actually picturing this, that a lot of times we look at life up here and we have our survival apparatus, fight, flight, or freeze. And what NVC is about dropping down into the heart. It's not divorcing ourselves from our mind, but it's including and integrating this space of the heart that recognizes at the end of the day, all of our needs can be met. And so this beautiful platform of NVC can actually work where if you are expressing empathy to yourself, Deborah, there's something about that. And I can't even come to bring words to it, but where it's not necessary for the other person to know about nonviolent communication and the 4 steps or any of that, for there to be something that shifts. So the fact that you're able to be empathetic with yourself, something happens the next time you talk to somebody. And all of a sudden, your willingness to connect with your own feelings and needs, maybe you're just willing to listen to them empathetically. One of the great things that I find with my clients, and maybe you can attest to this too, you know what I do a lot of? I do a lot of listening. Because I've recognized that a great, great desire of many people out there is just to have somebody to listen to them. Just listen, and listen not in the sense of I'm going to fix this, not from the sense of, okay, let me hear this so that I can give you a quick solution, but just to be present with them. And that's where empathy comes in, because empathy means I don't have to agree with you. But what it does mean is that I can be present with you, irregardless of if I agree with you or not. So that's what's really beautiful about this.
Wow, it's so deep. I have like 25 million questions. I'm trying to communicate them in a logical order. Okay, so when you say fight, flight, or freeze, can you just define each term? And then I want to also talk about, my next question is about how do you make a request? And if you're not supposed to get your needs met, then what are you requesting?
Okay, so the first thing is I'll speak for myself, and in terms of humanity, we're given these survival skills, And so whenever we feel that, or I feel that there's a situation in which I feel threatened, in which I feel my safety is at question, fight, flight, or freeze are typically 3 strategies that we as human beings innately express. So if I find that my children are in a situation of danger, I'm ready in a moment to defend against that, to maintain their safety. So I'm willing to fight. Flight is another strategy where if it's a situation and I can get out of it very quickly, I'll leave. So that's flight. That's another strategy to maintain safety, security, and protection. Freeze. Sometimes, there are those situations or those relationships that we're in, and things are happening that we don't know how to deal with, and we decide we're just gonna be very quiet and not say anything and hope that it just passes. And that's another way that we can sort of try to survive a situation, which is freezing, which is deer in the headlights. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be passive here and hope that it just keeps this situation just removes itself from my space. And quite honestly, there are many relationships, be they romantic, intimate relationships or whatever, that are based on those three strategies where people fight verbally, which is an actual voice-to-voice kind of fight action, or relationships that are dealing on flight, where they're just like, oh, forget it, and they just go there both ways, or freeze, where you just don't want to say anything that's untidy or that ruffles anyone's feathers, so I'm just going to be quiet and da-da-da-da. So those are just three ways that we try to navigate through this world, none of which, for the most part, have anything to do with vulnerability in the sense, and Brene Brown has spoken about this, the power of vulnerability, and saying in this moment, fight, flight, or freeze is something that I'm accustomed to. But when we're talking about connection, and we're talking about, there's something that I have to tell this person that I'm very scared to, all of a sudden, saying what you have to say can be worded in such a way where there's no judgment connected to it, but you can be authentic. So what we're really talking about here is accessing an honesty, but it's not accessing an honesty that's filled with a judgment or a criticism or even praise and punishment. And this is big, especially for me as a parent, because I grew up very aware that I have this choice. And when my sons do something that's not to my liking, like leave the clothes out or do something, and hey, it's time for dinner and they still haven't come, or wash your hands and da-da-da, it's very easy to go into, here's the punishment. But I have to recognize that if I'm instilling that practice and they see me instilling that particular strategy, they may model that as well. So I'm not talking about being a passive parent in any sense. What I'm talking about is that when we establish a quality of connection with ourselves, all of a sudden a new world opens up and we have a totally new literacy in a way to speak to our feelings, our needs, and our requests. So I'll give you a quick example. My son is very good at this. And what he's good at is watching how daddy makes requests. And so he'll come up to me, he's 5, almost 6 now, and he'll say, Daddy, would you be willing to go to the park with me, and then we can go swimming in the afternoon? So that's a huge turnaround from, Daddy, take me to the pool right now. I want to go right now. And if I don't go right now, da-da-da-da, and he starts crying and da-da-da-da.
Demand versus request.
Yeah.
So would you be willing to the request?
Yeah. And it's a kind of thing where it may sound like I'm giving you particular verbiage and language, and there's a structure and da-da-da-da. I've had the most empathetic moments in my life where I just sit and I just listen to someone. And all of a sudden they turn to me and go, you know what, I feel better. I just thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing me and understanding me. So it's a huge universe. NBC goes back 30 years. And interestingly enough, it's huge internationally. In Japan, it has a huge following, and here in America too. But it's really interesting in this age where we, to your point, have so many ways to communicate. And I don't know about you, but every once in a while, I got to take a Facebook fast. I'm just like, you know what? I love Facebook. I love the interactivity of it. Sometimes I got to step away from the bombardment of information and get present with myself. So that's ultimately what NVC can be, is our willingness to slow down and just check in with ourselves.
So the opposite of fight, or freeze strategy is to make a request, or the alternative is to make the request.
Yes, and I want to make sure that, as I hear you say that it is a process of action. This is not about any kind of pacifist platform where we just let things slide that we're irritated about and we find a peaceful way to deal with it. It's very action-centric. So when we make requests, it follows up right after a need. I'm really, let me see if I can think of an example here that's very clear and present. Yeah, so I got an email the other day, and the email was, I got to say, when I read it, I was really triggered, and I was ready to go into what I call defense strategy, and I can really show up as this defense attorney sometimes, where I have all my notes and I have all how I was right and how you were wrong, and I was ready to go into that mode. And so I decided to slow down. I said, what's going on with me? When I read this email, so I'm observing, right? I'm not saying
feel.
Yeah. When I read this email, that's one. Because I could have gone, and it's perfectly okay to be like, and you know what? I'm not ready to observe right now. I'm pissed off. Who's this person think they are, emailing me this with and saying what they said? Where do they come off? And So I want to be very clear that this is not in any way extricating ourselves from humanity. Let's keep it real. Mm-hmm. Something happens that you don't like. Hey, I get to be present with the fact that I don't like it.
Right.
So that's space first and foremost. Then, and I give myself a breath here. Yeah, when I read this email, I feel hurt. I feel sad. And I feel disappointed because I have a real genuine desire for connection and for progress and for action. That's really a positive kind of thing. And so I just being present with all those things swirling around in my body right now. And I'm just wondering if I'd be willing to just give myself some space on this before I respond to them. So that was the request, because we could also give requests to ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if I'd be willing to give myself some time before I respond to this person. And that was the time that I needed, so that when I returned that email, it was a lot more empathetic and connected to my own self in a way where the dialogue, hopefully when the person returns the email, because I said it yesterday, would be one of, what could the next step be? Because I guess what I shared in the email is my willingness to hear them. But see, I wasn't going to send that email when I first received what I received. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this practice is walking and falling down, because I got to be honest with you, there are multiple times where I lose it. I go back to fight, flight, or freeze. I go back to, I'm going to give as good as I got. So this is a wonderful platform that's not about perfection. It's about becoming progressively less stupid, as Marshall Rosenberg wrote.
Is that what he said?
That's what he said.
And if I understand you right, in order for us to be using the principles of nonviolent communication, we have to slow down and step away, because if we don't, then instinctually we'll go into fight, flight, or freeze just as like a reflex. Is that true?
I think that is possible. And I would recognize that at some point, maybe you don't need that time. Maybe just in that moment, you're already empathetically connected to yourself, and you say, wow, so when when this person walked right in front of me and I was standing in line to get some food and this person walked right in front of me, you just empathetically connected, and you can go through that whole process and what have you in a split second. But for me, I afford myself the luxury of slowing down.
And when I observe it, especially driving in Los Angeles, you get a lot of opportunities to observe your anger and frustration and anxiety, whatever. Yeah. And so what I noticed was, in my observing, because I've been healing from accidents and becoming a good driver again, and it's been an experience for me. So when somebody would beep at me, my first reaction would be, oh, they're pushing me, they want me to go forward. When I observe it, sometimes people are beeping at me because they want to protect me. They're warning me that there's a bike, or they're warning me that I should stop, or they're trying to tell me my trunk is open. You know what I mean? And when I take that time to pause and see that they're actually trying to help me rather than hurt me, I wouldn't be able to even know that if there wasn't that slowing down. Hashtag slow your roll. That's
I like that. I'm gonna start hashtagging that too.
Hashtag slow your roll. So when you slow down and are able to be that compassionate observer of your own reactions, then we're able to come from much more of a place of compassion and empathy for ourselves and for others, it seems like.
Yeah. I'll explain it to you or share it with you as it was shared to me. And it took me a while to sit with this. And what was shared with me is this idea that there's no such thing as a good feeling or a bad feeling. There's no such thing as a positive feeling or a negative feeling. That our feelings are merely indicators telling me about my needs. So all of a sudden the game totally changes there, because this idea that we have to be very mindful of when someone's behind me and they're beeping, no. All of a sudden, if I'm not careful, this enemy image begins to emerge of them, of this chain smoking. I don't even know if they smoke or not, but it's like all these character traits start entering in, this inconsiderate chain smoking Republican who's behind me and beeping their horn profusely, And so what just happened is my awareness was hijacked in that moment. Because I have a series of judgments, and rightfully so. My body was stimulated in that moment by something that was very sharp and alarming. And so my body is trying to make sense of all of this. And so when we're able to recognize that we have a tool, and sometimes the tool is there and we have access to it. Oh, great. Something happened in the office today and I was able to slow down. And hey, by the end of the day, I had a conversation with my coworker and things seem to be like they're moving in a progressive direction. That's great. Sometimes not so much. Something happens and something where our buttons are pressed and their buttons are pressed and they feel entitled and they feel right and we feel right and da-da-da-da. And it happens. But what's great about it is our willingness to just slow down and in any case, give ourselves the empathy that comes in really handy when we're mostly judging ourselves, when we can often criticize and assess ourselves. Why did I mess that thing up? Oh man, I'm such a terrible person. I always mess this up. Why does that keep happening to me? So before we even talk about the world outside of us, what NVC addresses is oftentimes the storms and the weather systems that are going on within us.
Very important. I wanted to also mention that there is a book, Nonviolent Communication, by Dr. Marsha Rosenberg that you can find on Amazon that's really, really helpful. And to just review, so the step one is we're observing, right, from a non-judgmental, just neutral place. Okay, this is what happened, just the facts. Then we're saying what feelings, what's alive in us? That's what Corey says. I like that. What's alive in me? What's alive in me? Is it anger? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it whatever it is? And again, not judging that. And then the third step is, what am I needing? This is where I need the chart. He's got a chart that is just off the hook that really helps, because sometimes you need things that you're not even aware, because we're really not taught. Like, I didn't realize I really need in a workplace autonomy. If I don't have autonomy, it's not going to work, because I need to have the freedom to do what I want when I want, and that's a real core thing. And actually, in every relationship I have, is that autonomy. And then making the request, and this is where, to me, is the challenge. Is the actual making the request. I'm glad that your son is the expert. Would you be willing to? But oftentimes, if you're not expecting someone to fulfill your needs, and you're really okay with getting your needs met yourself, how are you okay when you make a request and somebody says no? Like I made a request with someone, if they would be compassionate with me as I was compassionate with them, and they couldn't even understand what that meant. And I know
Right.
now why that was, but to me it was frustrating because I thought the request was a reasonable one, but to them it was like I was speaking Spanish and they were speaking French. So
Sure.
talk
So
about requests in the next 5 minutes before we wrap up.
absolutely, and this is such a sweet place because it's looking at a space in our lives that may have looked non-existent before this moment. Actually, our willingness to ask for things in such a way where someone is not hearing a demand, and we'll talk about that for a moment. So what's really precious about this is when I was becoming aware of nonviolent communication, I vastly had an idea or comprehension of what it would look like for my needs to be met. It was like a whole universe opened up to me. What do you mean my needs can be met? I'm so busy being a people pleaser and accommodationist, and it's about making those people happy so that I'm happy, right? And when I was able to recognize, oh, wait a minute, these things that are coming up in me, these feelings, they're pointing me to my needs. And there's this thing called requests that presupposes that if I ask something of someone or myself, that it might actually lead to the green light going on. But here's the caveat to this, and this is what makes it a really, really delicious, yummy thing, Deborah, is that we don't make requests to get the answer that we want.
Why?
The reason why we don't make requests to get the answer that we like, even though we may have an intention for that, is that that's not what this is about. What this is about is creating a quality of connection with someone where the possibility enters that our needs can be met. Okay? So if we have a connectivity to one another, then all of a sudden, this innate feeling of naturally wanting to give to one another is something that emerges. So a really quick story. Marshall Rosenberg, who founded Nonviolent Communication, went to northern Nigeria years ago to mediate a peace settlement. And it took him just 6 months to get the two tribes, Christian tribe and Muslim tribe, to agree for him to come in to even talk to them. And in the midst of that, many, many people were killed. And so when Marshall Rosenberg finally landed in northern Nigeria and got in the room with a representative of the Christian tribe and a representative of the Muslim tribe, he sat down, and one of the first things he asked is, I'd like you to tell me what needs of yours are not being met. And the Christian tribesman shouted out over at the Muslim contingency, and he said, you killed my child. And the other side shouted back, well, you've been dominating us for 50 years and we're not going to take it any longer. So notice the question that Marshall asked and the answer that he got were totally out of whack. They were very, very present, and rightfully so, with the hurt and the pain and the anguish, except they didn't necessarily have an understanding of being able to distill those feelings of hatred and hurt and sadness into feelings and needs. And that's what Marshall did with him. And it took him several hours. And he kept going back to the question, what needs of yours are being met? What needs of yours aren't being met or are being met? And so at one point he stopped and he said to the Christian tribesman, so if I hear you correctly, you'd really like a solution that doesn't involve violence to get progress and to get your needs met. And the person said, yeah, that's it. And he turned to the Muslim tribesman and he said, and if I'm hearing you correctly, you're sad because you have a real need for expressing your traditions in a way that feels very safe and free for you without condemnation or fear. He said, that's exactly what we've been saying. Well, that's not exactly what they had been saying, but it was something that Marshall Rosenberg was able to recognize was underneath the circumstance and what they were feeling in that moment. So they stopped killing each other. But they stopped killing each other not because they asked one another, will you stop doing this? But because a quality of connection was cultivated that it allowed for natural giving, where they felt like giving to one another. And they no longer heard a demand or no longer had as large an enemy image as they had at the beginning.
And that goes back to where we started from the very beginning of the show, is that the underlying prerequisite for communication is connection. And this is one of the reasons, even before we started, I was doing another meditation, like my third for today. The busier the day, the more I meditate, because for me, being mindful and connecting beyond my mind, but connecting just to just the peace and the love that is naturally underneath the surface of the temporal conditions and circumstances of our life. And so how can people, that maybe don't meditate or don't do yoga, some of the things that I do, walking outside, to get connected, how can people connect so that they can be present to their wants and needs? Can you give them just one simple tool, and then we're going to wrap up?
Yeah. Recognizing that they have choice and what that looks like. Yeah. So meditation, taking a long walk, yoga, those are great mindfulness exercises. And when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, knowing that I have a choice in that moment, that we always have choice. And when I'm going through the litany and I'm saying this person is mean and vindictive and they don't care about me and this, that, or the other, just to recognize that that is a narrative and that's a story, and there may be some truth to that, but it's not allowing me necessarily to get connected to myself. As a matter of fact, sometimes the judgments are encouraging disconnection. So in the midst of the moment where your listeners and anybody watching is going through your day, know that you have this invisible toolkit that's right inside you. And it's a very intelligent toolkit. And the toolkit is that whatever you're feeling in any given moment, I would dare subscribe that it is a gift. And the reason why it is a gift is because this beautiful body, this beautiful instrument is telling you something about your needs. So when you're able, and when we're able to slow down to hear what that is, life changes. Our experience with ourselves and our relationship with ourselves changes. And ultimately, possibility enters in that our interactions with others can change. And that can be for people where we say, you know what, Corey, that sounds all nice and dandy, but that sounds like a tall order for someone that anytime I get together with them, we just start arguing. And so the next time where you find yourself in a very tense situation, I just advise you to slow down and to ask yourself a beautiful question. And the beautiful question is this: what am I telling myself? What am I telling myself about what this person just said? It's not letting anybody off the hook. It's not making anything permissible, but it is allowing you to slow down. And in slowing down, the possibility that we're able to get connected to what's alive in us becomes greater and greater and greater. And it's something, I got to tell you, that I practice moment by moment. And there are days where I feel interconnected, and there are other days where I feel off. And it's a continuous, beautiful, challenging, creative, exploratory adventure. But I got to tell you this: my marriage and my relationship with my partner is better for it. My relationship with my children is better for it. My relationship with myself is better for it.
That's awesome. That is so beautiful. And that, I mean, that makes it all worth it. And the fact that you're able to help others, and you specialize, just to let people know, you specialize in doing executive coaching. So you work with CEOs of companies and help them to communicate better to their teams so that the company can be a healthier organization. How can people find out more information about booking you for training or executive coaching? Should they go to your website, or where would they do that?
Absolutely. CoreyTyler.com, CoreyTyler.com. And I do work particularly with professionals and corporate clients. And it's very interesting because I'll work with them on something that may be work related, but then the next thing I know, they're sharing about their relationship.
Oh, it's back to the relationship. Yeah.
It all gets down to it, because that's all this is. We typically define it in terms of, this is the workspace, and I have to have my game face on when I'm at the workspace, and this is when I'm at home, and this is when I'm with my friends, and this is when I'm playing sports or watching TV. And it really is all about relationships. So you'll find a phone number on my website. in which we can set up some time and have a quick consultation to see if it's a match or not. But I love it, Deborah. This is the joy of my life, and I'm so happy to have discovered it. And in addition to that, there is a trainer, a certified trainer in nonviolent communication. Her name is Mary McKenzie, and she actually has a book, I'll plug it right now, called Peaceful Living.
Ooh, I like that.
And she and I are teaming up to facilitate an NVC practice group here in Los Angeles. So if you go to my website, you'll see a link for a meetup group. And if you're in the LA area, Culver City area, we invite you to join that. And when we get the group going, which will probably be in about October, November, there's a chance you can actually join us on the ground and not only learn about this stuff, but be able to practice it on a monthly basis continuously.
I will be there for sure. You know.
I know you will be.
Going right to the website, CoreyTyler.com. Click on the meetup and join. And the reason why I'm so committed is because I consider myself to be a leader in the field that I'm in and just in the world. And it's so important. It's like emotional intelligence, self-awareness, to be able to identify my own needs and to be able to communicate not just on a stage as a speaker, but with myself and in interpersonal relationships. And I know that's an area of growth for me, and I'm so grateful to have Corey as my coach, my practitioner. And so I'm glad to have this opportunity. I want to thank you so much. I was so looking forward to this call and to be able to share you with the world, because whenever I have a blessing in my life and someone that has been a tremendous resource and such a great asset to me, I want to share it with everyone I love, which is all of you watching. So you are getting the benefit of Corey, and definitely check him out. Are you on social media as well? Can they connect with you on a regular basis there? Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, Corey Tyler on Facebook, Twitter, it's Corey Tyler, Instagram, it's Corey L. Tyler. I'm there. And,
but the L for some love, right? That's
exactly. I love that.
Corey L. Tyler on Instagram, Corey Tyler on Facebook, and also on Twitter. And definitely go to his website so that you can get that information. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody else. I know this call was so full of information. We're already 1 minute over, but I just wanted to get all of that from you. And I know that we're all going to process this, learn from it, but most importantly, practice it in order to truly have the transformation. It's not just the knowledge, it's not just the wisdom, it's the application and integration, my friends. So I invite you to practice what he was talking about. And if you want to go deeper with it, definitely pick up the book, definitely join the meetup, definitely go to his website, call him, experience a session with him, and you will for sure transform. My name is Deborah Deras. I really want to encourage you to subscribe, please, on my YouTube channel, and invite others. Share this on your Facebook wall. Share this with Twitter. You know, my commitment is anytime I get great resources is to share it, because sharing is caring, and I invite you to do the same thing. So share this out on all your social media. Have your friends and family subscribe, because wouldn't the world be a wonderful place if we were all compassionate communicators? That's my intention, and I hope it's yours. So let's once again thank Corey again. Send him love.
Thank you, Deborah. And if you don't subscribe, everyone, I'm going to demand that. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Would you be willing to subscribe? That's a good one.
See,
would you be willing to press the red button to subscribe to my YouTube? Because it is my intention that all of this positive energy I have to give is received in the world. That's really the bottom line. So I'm not asking you to do anything else but to spread love and light. So that's it. So I want to thank you so much for tuning into Deb TV, where we are dynamic, empowered, and bold. And we tune in every Tuesday for Transformational Tuesday. When you subscribe, you will get an automatic email when we go live so that you don't miss an episode. And the wonderful thing is when you subscribe, you'll be connected with the Transformational Tuesday playlist. So you'll not only just get one episode, but you can watch all of the episodes. And you can binge watch like you do with Orange is the New Black. But it's all about your transformation spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and that's what I'm about. So you can also connect with me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, Deborah Deras, Periscope, Deborah Deras, Instagram, Deborah Deras. You've got it. It's Deborah Deras. So thank you so much, and I wish you all a magnificent day or evening. And remember, with the power of synergy, anything is possible. Ciao for now. Bye, Corey.
Ciao.
Yeah.
Blessings,
Bye,
everyone.
ciao, ciao.